So how's everyone feeling this morning? Good. We're here to talk about the B2B marketing playbook. Exciting stuff. There's been a lot of change that's happened in the industry with digital transformation, add the pandemic into the mix, and a lot more consumers are using online as their means of transaction, whether it's through research, whether it's through actually placing the buy and taking that action. What we're finding and what we're here to talk about today is the fact that B2B customers are now expecting and demanding a B2C experience. And that plays a huge role on this panel that I'm here speaking with today, because it affects things from the organizational structure. It affects things from, who focuses on what? How do we use the data? Salespeople, do they care about the data? There's so many facets of this transformation that we're going to dive into in the next few minutes. But before we do that, I would love for each of our panelists to just quickly introduce themselves. I should probably do that too. I am Tricia Allen, obviously. I do represent Reticle AI. We are a contextual digital product offering, and we leverage emotion. So we allow brands to align their creative within tonal aligned digital content to drive attention and engagement. But I would love to start with you, Kristin. If you want to just do a brief intro, we'll go through the panel and then we'll kick it off.
Hi, this is working. Hi, I'm Kristin Gower. Despite the accent, I'm based here, and I lead the EssenceMediacom's global B2B practice, with a bit of commerce on the side.
Hi there, thanks for having me. Toni Clayton-Hine. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for EY for the Americas. We are a $50 billion professional services firm, and also based here in New York.
Hi, Tonya Foucault. I'm the Senior Director at Ecolab for our enterprise marketing, and Ecolab is the global sustainability leader committed to really getting after clean environments. And so we're just really excited to be here today. I have been a part of B2B marketing my entire career, and so it's really fun to actually see B2B at center stage.
Awesome. There was going to be a slide, but we don't need that. Or maybe it's coming. Fantastic. I want to turn it over to you.
The other slide for whoever's doing that.
Okay. I want to turn it over to you, Kristin, first. I know EssenceMediacom has done some research in this B2B space in understanding some of the dynamics. Can you walk us through just a little bit? What are we looking at here? What are some of the key takeaways from that research that your agency conducted?
Yeah, so about beginning of summer, we, B2B marketing has been exploding over the last few years. Huge uptick in e-commerce, the number of events, the number of dollars that are going into B2B marketing. And we established the EssenceMediacom B2B group about a year ago to deal with the increasing demands from our clients for a more sophisticated B2B marketing approach. And as part of that, we started looking at what was happening in B2B marketing and trying to find some data about the experiences of marketers with this huge influx of dollars, and couldn't find anything. So we conducted this research, global research, with C-suites and Fortune 500 companies on what is the experience of B2B marketers, what is happening in the organization, what are the challenges, where are the wins, and we found the overall theme is that the B2B marketing director, CMO, is increasingly the growth orchestrator. They are the voice of the consumer that needs to get the sales team, the customer success team, the data teams behind this idea of customer centricity. And in doing that, that CMO is facing three primary challenges. One, marketing organizations are actually ahead of the curve. The organizations are holding them back, the organizational structures in silos. Customer centricity is a big rhetoric. How do we move it to reality? And then a lot of what we're talking about today, a rethink in how we're looking at B2B marketing and rethinking those playbooks and what it means to be a B2B consumer, a B2B channel, or a B2B piece of content is very different.
Let's dive into that just a little bit more with you, Kristin. what does it mean to be customer-centric? In the business of marketing and media, shouldn't we always be customer-centric? How is this different?
So customer centricity in this sense is not about, putting the customer first. It's about aligning, the entire organization behind customer-led growth. And if you think about B2B organizations, they are often product-led growth, right? So how do you get an entire organization behind this idea of customer-led growth, moving away from just acquisitions into cross-sell, upsell, retention, and loyalty? How do you get an entire organization behind one goal, revenue, and moving away from marketing KPIs and sales KPIs? And then how do you change the structure away from perhaps lines of business that are product-based into all being about the customer, that every decision? And the first part of that is knowing your customer and then democratizing that data, right? So is all the customer data from media, from phone calls, from sales events, from webinars, all being brought together into one place and then democratized across the organization so that everyone can use that data in their own department to be customer first. And that is really rare. It's really rare, first of all, to aggregate that data and then to democratize it across the organization. And if you're not doing that, then you're not a customer-centric organization.
Thank you, Kristin. Tonya, a question for you when it comes to being customer-centric. How have you embraced that in your organization, and what are some examples or experiences you've had in doing so?
Yeah, definitely. So Ecolab just celebrated 100 years, so we're a 100-year-old company, and a little bit set in our ways. We definitely have a large sales organization. That's been our go-to-market, is going through the sales team. And so we have historically been very sales-driven. Lower funnel sales enablement activity is what we've been best at. But I would say as we've started to evolve, we've been using and leveraging the full funnel. So really understanding that there is opportunity with every interaction with our brand that can drive customer loyalty before a customer is even a customer. We've also been trying to kind of change and enable our sales organization to talk a little bit differently to our customers. So less about the product and more about the outcome or the value that it delivers. So an example of that is a lot of our customers are the big chains in hotels and restaurants. And post-COVID, the labor challenge was a really big concern for them. And so making sure that we're talking more about labor savings instead of the product details.
Perfect. Thank you, Tonya. Toni, let's talk to you for a second. When it comes about dealing with that changing buyer profile in B2B, and you've got this rise of these digital-first consumers, what adjustments have you made at EI to help in your approach, and how are you engaging with those customers?
Yeah, I think because we are generally dealing with the largest companies, we have a lot of our internal stakeholders who really want to talk to the C-suite, at which point they will often target CFO, CEO, CIO, and really just having a broader conversation about how do you engage a buying group and the influencers within the organization in addition to the individual title that they're going after. And, just like Tonya said, coming from a sales-driven organization to looking more generational shift to a digital-first organization or digital-centric organization means that we have to start developing programs, campaigns, messages, content that will appeal across that buying committee and understand the power of the influencers within the business.
Yeah, and I think just to connect that back to the customer centricity, B2B organizations are used to talking to the customer that they know, right? Whether that's in person or in a kind of ABM relationship. But part of that moving into where the customer is, it means moving into channels and experiences and spaces that may not be immediately attributable, right? So you have to have the confidence to have content into spaces in the internet where you don't yet know who your customer is. That's 2 years ahead of when they make a decision. But by the time, B2B customers are still people. By the time they come to that decision making, they've done the research, they've done all that kind of work. So putting content out there in those spaces and then having a measurement framework to connect all that together is really important. And We hear a lot around, oh, it's too hard to measure brand in B2B, it's too hard to do that. That's why there's a marketing KPI. It's not true. It is perfectly possible to connect brand impact to sales 2 years down the track, but it requires a different approach in the organization to get there. And I think ABM is a really good example, right? The evolution of that. It used to be very lower funnel, very kind of targeted at retargeting, selling a product message. And now ABM is being used for prospecting and to reaching a wide range of people, including CTV.
Thank you, Kristin. Tonya, in speaking about that and content and how things do need to change, obviously the traditional ways and the traditional approaches of putting content in front of consumers will also need to change. Do you have some examples that you've recently used where you've changed the content, flipped the script in a way, adjusting this new playbook to focus on a more, taking a B2B customer but treating them like a B2C customer?
Yeah, so I mean, I think historically in B2B, the channels for us have been the trades, so trade publications, trade shows. Most recently, we've been, having some fun with this and leaning into influencer marketing. So, for example, the celebrity chef influencers have been working really hard for us because they serve a dual audience for us. Not only does their content resonate with our customers, so like I mentioned, the hospitality and food service industry, but also our customers' customers. So those consumers that are actually going into those establishments to dine. So that's been really fun to see. We've also kind of been leaning into, some test and learn. So playing around with clean talk on the clean talk trend on TikTok. And so those have been some, I think, really good areas. Also with our sustainability initiative, we're targeting those CEOs, much like EY. And so we, just this last September here in New York during Climate Week, did some events around. We used out of home. We were doing billboards in Times Square and NASDAQ and, on Ubers and the taxi tops. And so it was some very untraditional media for us, but doing it very strategically, tentpole times, so those high traffic areas and times where our audience would be able to see it.
That's fantastic. So using more traditional media channels to focus and kind of shake up a non-traditional approach that used to exist where, in our prep for saying, business isn't done on the golf course anymore. You're not closing deals. It's not necessarily that one-to-one. It's one-to-many while keeping that one-to-one feel. How do you think that, this is for you again, Tonya, how have you approached that in your organization? How do you still maintain that human aspect to the relationship, knowing that you have to communicate with this consumer a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we've definitely been playing to the strengths of our sales organization. So lower in the funnel, that's where they do best, getting after that operational end user. That's who they're comfortable going after. That's where they get the opportunity to educate. They can give our reasons to believe, solve their challenges. And then we're also using that upper funnel. So that's where we want to kind of cut through the noise, make that emotional connection, getting after the different buying set that's looking for a different value. So brand protection or sustainability. So that might be the owners or the marketing teams at these big brands. So holistically, we're able to use the whole funnel, the entire funnel to get after, both that emotional and educational content.
Perfect, thank you. Let's shift gears just a little bit. Toni, this one's for you. When we're talking about the internal organization, what strategies has your organization used to really foster productive partnerships, both internally, corralling all the key stakeholders together, but also working with your agency partners, like Kristin at EssenceMediacom? What's been working?
So I'll take that in two parts, right? So internally, we have each of the teams embedded in the different elements of the business. We are a highly matrixed organization, so we have marketers that are focused on service line or business unit, ones that are focused on sector or industry, ones that are focused more on brand, centers of excellence. So really just trying to make sure that we have groups of people that understand what the business drivers are based on the audience, really going back to listening to the voice of the client, the voice of the market as much as possible, and then connecting the dots between what we're trying to sell, what the client is trying to buy, how they're prioritizing, and how do we thread that together. So a big difference is making sure that we're enabling and empowering the marketing teams to have more strategic conversations because they know what's happening in the market and they understand the business. And when you go back to moving from a marketing KPI to a business KPI, you have to be able to understand what's going to drive that. Is it margin sensitive? Is it top line growth? Is it net new areas? Is it, so what does that look like, and what is our contribution to that? And then once we understand that, then being able to take that component or priority with the agencies to say, okay, how do we want to bring this to life? And to your point, Tonya, about wanting to tell that story in a different way, we have really worked hard with our agency partners, with WPP, not just MediaCom, but Ecolab and others, to build out campaigns that are much more story-like in nature, much more human, use a lot of humor, being able to really look at branded content in a new way so that our people could tell our stories. I mean, fundamentally, we sell expertise, so people are our product, right? And how we deliver those solutions and how we deliver that expertise needs to come through. And so just being able to work with the agencies to say, if this is what we're trying to get out there, how would we tell that story in a new, different, or very human way? And just being open to kind of crazy ideas. Like, I have a lot of crazy, I'm like, what's the crazy idea that we could put together? Which, Kristin's like, yes, I know. So thank you for that. And then, just really leveraging internally that idea, test and learn, try and fail, see what happens. We're working on a program right now where we wanted to do this sort of video podcast series where we said, well, we'll just try it. So we're going to put our chief economist, who's like literally a chief economist, not super smart. And I'm like, okay, so how are we going to put him in a room with some of our leaders that can have the connection between what's happening in the market to how will it apply, and then what would that studio look like? And so just trying it, and if it doesn't work, we'll shift, right? But just being able to constantly test and learn. And just as a side note on that, when we told them they had to wear headphones, because it was like a video podcast, they freaked out. They were like, what? Like, trust us, it's gonna look really good. They're like, the headphones don't work. We're like, just trust us, it's gonna look great. So they're getting there. But then that's the other part of like creating that partnership with the business so that they understand what you're trying to get after, and then also bringing them along with you when you're trying to test and learn as well, because we need them to be part of that.
Fantastic. So it sounds like having a great relationship with your agency and vice versa, having trust in that agency is critically important, and not being afraid to try new things. Kristin, I'd love to hear from you from an EssenceMediacom point of view. Obviously, you've got two amazing supportive clients that you're really tackling this transformation. What advice would you give to other marketers working with their agencies? What types of partnerships work best, and have there been any bottlenecks or challenges that you've come across, and how have those been overcome?
You flipped the question on me. So now I'm going to have to wing it. So I think in terms of what makes a good partnership, I mean, before joining EssenceMediacom and B2B, I spent the first 20 years in consumer marketing a lot with Dyson, right? So when I say that I believe that B2B marketing is more multidimensional, I might have a bias now, but I've based it on years of Dyson and P&G and things like that. And by more multidimensional, what I mean is that over a 2-year journey, you have a lot of disparate data. You have buying committees, not single people. You have a lot of people involved in that, procurement, sustainability, marketing, C-suite, whatever the case is. So I think the first thing you need to look for in an agency is people who understand go-to-market strategies, because that's the B2B challenge, right? Is this a product-led? Is this ABM-led? Is this freemium-led? Is this e-commerce? So having a partnership that is strategic in a business sense, in a go-to-market sense. Beyond that, there needs to be a multi-dimensional team. So when we changed up the EssenceMediacom B2B team, we now have experts from marketing technology, customer experience and connected customer. We have obviously media and creative and those kind of things, also CRM, because those are all the things that matter to B2B, even if you're just doing a media campaign, right? So a multidisciplinary team, I think, is really important. We're hearing a lot at the moment about what B2B marketers are supposed to be learning from B2C or being more like B2C. And I would put just a shade of nuance on that, right? I think there are lessons we can learn from B2C, like being braver in our experimentation, like innovating, being willing to try something without knowing it's going to work. But we are all human is not a B2B strategy, right? You know, I'm human, a Maasai warrior is human, and we get our food in a very different way, right? So that whole idea of just we are human doesn't count to me as a B2B strategy. So I think there are lessons to be learned while keeping in mind that B2B is more complicated, involves more people at every stage, and you need a team that knows all of those pieces along that journey.
Perfect, thank you. See, I knew you'd be able to answer that even if I tweeted it.
I might regret the analogy later, but
That's all good. It's all good. Toni, as we know, B2B marketing is expanding. You, as a CMO, are now responsible for a lot more. There's some different responsibilities that are falling into your purview. How do you manage those cross-functional responsibilities? How do you corral everyone together and get everyone aligned? You know, you're balancing brand building, you're balancing demand generation, marketing, all of the data. What do we do with this data? How has it been working for you internally at EY?
Well, I mean, the lovely thing about EY is that we really have a very strong brand purpose in terms of building a better working world. So there is a lot of energy and acceptance that brand platform exists, and then we need to continue to fill and build that engine. So that, from my standpoint, is more of a care and feeding type of thing. And then at the lower funnel, we have a lot of energy and activity around creating connections, because that's largely how the sale is done and over a long period of time. So we had a lot of initiatives around events and sponsorships and roundtables and different hospitality events and those types of things. I think that the thing we focus on the most now is sort of the middle tier of that, or whether that's mezzanine messaging, like how is, you know, AI going to change the face of M&A? How is AI going to change supply chain? What, you know, those sort of broader initiatives. What are the issues that a CFO is facing and their team as they look to create some sort of transformation? What happens when the regulatory environment changes because President Biden puts out an executive order? So like those are below the brand and above the actual service, and then threading that together is probably where we spend the most of our energy. Not necessarily even money, but just trying to help the business talk to itself. And then, as we mentioned, you know, each of our groups are identified with a business unit or with a sector or industry, and so we end up working together on the back end as the brand and marketing team to synthesize what the business wants and then bring it back to say, since everybody has their own priorities. And my favorite is like, they're really just a 3-pillar strategy with 5 things underneath, which have 3 subcomponents and 8 and guys, it's, I know you think it's 3 because you put 3 on a slide, but like you just gave us 15. So how do those come together? Like, what are the common things? And just also trying to help the business appreciate that how many messages are we putting out, and how people how often can people consume those, or how much is realistic. So, you know, just helping people understand from the outside in, not just the inside out, is probably where we spend the most time and energy.
Thank you. fun work, exciting work, sometimes maybe frustrating work?
I mean, here's the thing. At EY we live with our brand, right? So we have a unique perspective that I always look at it as when we get these crazy calls like, I'd like to sponsor the fill in the blank, or I have a new idea, or would you, literally someone said to me a couple weeks ago, well, they don't run out of room on the internet. Can't we just publish it? I was like, okay, breathe. That kind of goes, well, all right, let's think about how we talk. But I also just look at it from the standpoint that they want to do something. They want to be in market. They want to connect. So I sort of take the approach that we should talk about how do we corral that energy and to say, okay, what do we want to achieve and what's the outcome versus the input? And we spend a lot of time on that. Otherwise, it could be crazy when someone says, can't you just publish the 30-second article on something that no one will ever read because you can?
Right.
So it's an education, but I kind of believe it comes from a good place.
Of course. Fantastic. Well, listen, it wouldn't be a panel in 2023 if we didn't talk about AI, right? I hope in 2024 we have a new topic that we hang our hat on. Kristin, how can we use generative AI in marketing strategies as we're supporting our clients? Any thoughts or any examples that EssenceMediacom has utilized?
And I can't remember if it's up there on the slide or not, but what we found when we did the research that true to form, when marketers think about generative AI as opposed to just AI, they immediately go to content, right? You know, how many times can we change the color of the backdrop on our Facebook post? But I think where we're seeing where the most impact could be, to go back to that first point around customer centricity, there is a huge amount of data in B2B over that 2-year journey. Bringing all of that together and then using generative AI to produce insights, that's really exciting. So we're doing a project at the moment with Google where we had built a very sophisticated data warehouse, petabytes, I believe is the term that was used. But coming out of that was still the typical PCA type reporting. But now that we're using generative AI to pull out insights in real time, visualized, which makes those insights actionable. And that's what's really important, right? So how can we take those insights now across the organization, because everyone can understand a visualization in real time, and then do something about it. Another one that I think is really fun is Dell and NVIDIA partnering with enterprises to bring together as-a-service hardware, which obviously is a new B2B kind of sales model, as-a-service hardware with NVIDIA software, with Dell expertise, to have a ready-made LLM model that enterprises can use into their own data sets. So on-premise, they take this model from Dell and NVIDIA, put their own data into it, and generate their own insights. So I understand how changing the color on your Facebook post is probably more fun, but these insights that you're getting from this kind of thing, that will be a huge impact. Right?
Fantastic. Just looking at time, I don't know who my timekeeper is. We've got about 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. And they're looking at me saying, Trish, you didn't prep me for this. What is she going to ask? Don't worry. I'll throw it out to all three of you, and then you're welcome to all three respond, whoever feels most compelled. What's keeping you up at night as it comes to this transformation? What is it that you know that you are well on the road to, but there's something still niggling in your head, and 2024 is coming up and we're planning? What are one of the things that you're worried about going into 2024?
Are you specifically talking about AI or in general?
In general, when it comes to the B2B marketing playbook, your experience within your organization, how far you've come this year.
I think we've talked about this throughout the conference too. It's, we're maintaining flat budgets. So I think it's the resources to be able to do more things. Especially, we're seeing definitely, I think, the marketing KPIs, but how does that relate, how are we closing the loop with the sales organization and really driving revenue? So seeing that impact and then being able to get the resources to do more of it, I think is where the biggest challenge for us right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, we're constantly looking at how do we maintain, grow, prioritize our budgets to make the biggest impact. As we all know, if things get tight, the marketing spend gets called into question. So do we have all of our data in a row to be able to show the impact that it makes? And then how do we maintain the focus on, upper mid-funnel, longer-term strategies when everybody wants to focus on the shorter-term tactics? And so just making sure not only that we have the data, but a lot of times we'll reframe the objective to allow us to do that. So when somebody wants to talk, we're just focused on demand gen, I suddenly put a lot of things in that bucket in order to be able to, to continue to do things for the long term, while helping the business feel like that they're getting the actual ask that they have on the shorter term tactics.
Change the title of the slide to demand management.
That's exactly.
There we go.
I'm not going to say it other than that.
Kristin, anything you want to add?
Maybe less around what I worry about, but what I think is a huge opportunity is e-commerce. So I mentioned that in the beginning. E-commerce for B2B is growing at 5 times the rate of consumer. But within agencies, we all talk about consumer, right? And B2B has a lot more money, but it's a more complex, again, you're not putting a banner, clicking, buying the shoe, getting the result, and you're done. So I think the e-commerce space for B2B is super exciting, but it's looking at all aspects of the e-commerce. What is the shipping component, the payable components, what is the kind of warehouse shopping experience? How do we treat e-commerce when we're moving away from acquisition, right, into lifetime value? So we're doing a lot of work at the moment across WPP and EssenceMediacom to connect a B2B commerce offering that brings it all together, because there are the components of marketing technology and CRM and media and all the rest of it. So I think that is a really exciting space, and if I was an in-house marketer, that's where I would be looking, because you could show a lot of value and you could show the impact of marketing in that space.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, hopefully everyone got some new insights into how we need to rethink the marketing playbook when it comes to B2B. I'm going to open it up just for a couple minutes. Questions. Does anyone have any questions for the panel?
Hi. I'm kind of surprised in a B2B panel that LinkedIn wasn't talked about at all. Could you talk about just some of the tactical things that you think are most successful with your LinkedIn strategy, or any social media, but I would assume for B2B, LinkedIn is the primary.
Well, I'll start as a pushback, and then they can take it as a positive. One of the quotes that we actually had in this report was, the problem is everyone's fighting for the last impression on LinkedIn, right? And that's a quote that we got from one of our marketers. Now, LinkedIn, for any LinkedIn people in the room, is obviously one of our closest partners, and we do a lot of work with all of our clients. But the point of this panel was, how do we go beyond LinkedIn, right? How do we look at different channels? How do we look at Snapchat, TikTok, Reddit, etc. So, for LinkedIn, for us, we have innovations around APIs, around audience data. We do a lot of work with them in terms of content placement. So they're a great partner, both in terms of insight sharing, thought leadership, as well as just your typical kind of advice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's food, water, shelter, LinkedIn. We're obviously it's baseline for us. I mean, the one thing I do love about LinkedIn is they have so much data. So, and they're such a great partner to be able to say, what would this look like with this audience in this segment, and what's resonating, and what does the competitive landscape look like, and what are the buying groups look like? And so I find them extremely helpful to be able to mine the data for us. That's just going to make our campaigns better.
Kristin, you mentioned the B2B e-commerce space. Do you have any examples of how that's played out? Someone that you've done work for, or you know about, where you've seen?
So when I moved to the US, about 7 years ago, and I was leading Dell at that time. And at the time, my first meeting with the CMO, she said, consumer keeps us in the press and B2B keeps us in the black, right? And 6 years later, we now have a brief that says we are a B2B organization, we do B2B marketing, right? So there's been that kind of flip. And we saw the same thing in e-commerce. Obviously, Dell is a heavy D2C company. Most of our media goes into D2C, but B2B wasn't on e-commerce at all. So about 3 years ago, they wanted to pilot that from their sort of premium pages moving into e-commerce. And together with other WPP agencies like Wunderman Thompson, we did the whole thing from scratch, building out the site, the product strategy, the SKU strategy, the marketing strategy. We did pilot in 2 markets. It's been so successful, it's now in 13 markets, and it's becoming a massive part of their business. So yeah, I had that one up the sleeve.
Yeah, you were ready, so that works. Please join me in thanking our panelists today. That was incredibly impressive.